and good morning, and welcome into the newest edition of Big Talk College Sports with a Midwest Perspective, Blue Collar and Blue Blood. I am Sam Sprunger. I am joined newly, for the interim at least right now, Tony Hollinsworth. Tony, how in the world are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little nervous because I'm trying to replace the Patrick Mahomes of Big Talk. I got to replace Dalton. Hopefully, he appreciates that little shout out of him being Patrick Mahomes.
You'll never replace the hardest working dude that I would assume I could speak for you on this. The hardest working dude in this medium. That we know.
Very much so. I know you pointed it out last week as kind of the farewell. Like for people who don't know, I mean, Dalton legitimately has an entire like playbook essentially of every single team, every single player, every single person broken down with like every stat. Like when we talk about the GOAT of Big Ten, Big Talk, and coming in with his knowledge of the Big Ten conference as a whole, there are very, very few people I think could even come close to competing with Dalton in that retrospect.
And I kind of made a joke about it, but at the same time, told him I was truly honest and being truthful. Was the guy can talk about the third string quarterback for Illinois and be pretty confident of what he's telling you. And that's not making a joke necessarily, even though it's funny. It's because he works that hard. So
yes,
and
he
does a great job. But we got to move on though, Tony. So thank you for filling in for the interim and maybe permanently. Don't know.
Permanente?
Not sure. But we'll see which way the road takes us, and how things can work out. But for the interim, thank you so much for filling in. So let's talk. Let's get into it. Let's now we've got the paperwork out of the way. Now we can get moving on this.
Do my vacation days start too? Because Dalton acquired a lot of vacation days. I want vacation days.
Oh well, the first 10 weeks. Yes, we gave you 10 weeks at that time that you left, but then after 10 weeks, you'd used it all. Then you went on hiatus.
Oh, true. Okay.
So
gotta start back from ground zero. We'll get there. We'll start. We'll work back up. It's fine. No big deal in that regard.
All right. Well, let's talk about the games from last week a little bit. They were a little bit more interesting than what we're looking at this week. You and I were just talking off air that there might be some games that could be okay. They have some meaning, but you're still not hyped to watch them. But let's get into last week. I was telling you before, I feel there are two confusing results from last week and one good game result, and the rest were just kind of, that's what we kind of assumed that were going to happen. Let's start off with the Friday game. Last Friday, the Iowa Hawkeyes go out to Los Angeles and lose to UCLA. Dalton and I talked about this, that that UCLA is such a great feel-good story for the fact that they weren't expected to do much of anything, and they got to win 2 more games, but it is possible that they could go bowling. Yep. And if they are, that's a big thing, but neither of us foresaw them beating Iowa. We just didn't think that they'd be able to produce enough against that defense. They proved us wrong. They did enough.
Yeah.
I mean, they only had to stop the Iowa offense, but
true. But hey, let's give a little bit of shout out though to Jacob Gill, the wide receiver for Iowa. 6 receptions for 138 yards. I don't know if that's been done for like the last 6 years for
since Charlie Jones.
Like they haven't had a wide receiver like that in a hot minute. But I mean, credit to UCLA too, because you had Garbers. Garbers he didn't really have a good game. I mean, he's 21 to 34, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. They really relied on TJ Harden because he had 20 carries for 125 yards. So, I mean, they did just enough to be able to put themselves in the position to win. And like you said, really, you just have to get through Iowa's defense because that offense isn't exactly hard to stop. But at least the Hawkeyes kept it interesting on offense. I mean, it was 17-20, not the most high scoring game, high scoring for Iowa's sake, but they at
Yeah.
least kept it close anyway.
I mean, I did not watch any of it. I broadcast on Fridays. We had a game. I didn't see any of it. I didn't. It probably started after I got home, even with it being in LA. Excuse me, but it just. I looked on Saturday morning. I'm like, are you kidding me? UCLA ended up winning. I looked through it, and just like you said, they didn't have a great game, but they had a good enough game to beat Iowa. And so that one was the first of two that really confused me last week.
Yeah,
With the conversation that Dalton and I had about these games, we even talked about both the games specifically, and did not ever mention either of these outcomes. We'll go to the bottom, or the second one that I'm talking about. It's Rutgers beating Minnesota 26-19. Kalikmanis, he threw 3 touchdowns against his former Minnesota teammates, and Rutgers ends their 4-game losing streak and totally brings the boat to a halt.
Yeah,
in Minnesota, because I think it's more. How do I say this? I think this is more detrimental to Minnesota than it is beneficial to Rutgers, even though it's getting Rutgers closer to bowl eligibility. I just think that they had so much going on, beating some, even though USC's struggling, they beat USC. They'd won some games that they shouldn't have. They're bowl eligible, 6-3 going into Piscataway, and you lose to a team that has a 4-game losing streak. Now, we did talk about it, Dalton and I. Rutgers isn't bad, but not with the way Minnesota's been playing. We just didn't. That was the other confusing score.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, Minnesota came in on a 4-game winning streak.
Right.
Rutgers came in on a 4-game losing streak. And I mean, they not only lost to Nebraska in a pretty close game, they got thumped by Wisconsin. You lose to both LA teams. At least UCLA, they kept it fairly close. But then, you come into Minnesota. And here's what I'll say, too, that I think has probably the biggest margin of volume to it for why Rutgers won. Kalikmanis was Minnesota's starting quarterback last year and was even on the bench for him a couple years before that.
Right.
So, I mean, if anybody knew this Minnesota Golden Gophers team, it's him, inside and out. And I mean, his stats wise, I mean, they kind of showed a little bit. He was 17-33, 240, 3 touchdowns and 1 pick. So, I mean, it kind of showed that, he knows the team. He's still the quarterback that he is, but he at least kept it close. And it is weird when you look at Minnesota, like you said, you've had some high points. You kept it close against Michigan early on at the time. You turn around, you end up upsetting USC.
Should have had an opportunity to at least tie Michigan and get it to overtime.
Correct.
Should have had that. But
correct.
Go ahead.
And like we've even talked about before a couple weeks ago, you're just, one mistake away from even beating North Carolina to start the season.
Yeah.
And you're even potentially sitting there at 3-0 at the current time. So, and you even beat number 24 Illinois just the week before. So it does kind of make you wonder if maybe Minnesota didn't come into this maybe a little bit too cocky. They're like, oh, it's Rutgers. Rutgers is probably down in the dumps. We obviously have what we think should be a better team than them. So we're probably not going to take this as seriously. And they ended up falling victim to what I would consider a good old trap game.
Well, yeah, and I think the biggest thing, and from what I've seen, is Minnesota's running game was atrocious.
It was bad.
They only ran for 35 yards. They ran the ball 19 times and got 35 yards. Yeah. You should be able to fall forward 19 times and get more than 35 yards.
Darius Taylor was their lead rusher. He had 28 yards on 10 carries, 2.8 yards a carry.
Yeah, and a long of 18.
So he
had 10 yards on 9 carries after that. Oh, if you take that 118 yard. So it was ugly when it came to the running game. It was just not honestly, historically with PJ Fleck, that's not a normal outcome from the running game. If
Mm-hmm.
if Minnesota's able to put 100 rushing yards out there,
Mm-hmm.
they probably win this game. But Rutgers was able to get 120 yards rushing. That's with Kalkmanis being sacked 3 times
Right.
for 19 negative yards. So Rutgers just outplayed them, period. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
get much more than that. Both teams threw for over 200 yards, over 240.
Mm-hmm.
Kalkmanis was at 240, and Brosmer, Max Brosmer for Minnesota, 262.
Yeah.
So the passing game was equal. Now, Brosmer only threw for 1 touchdown.
Yeah.
But they only lost by 1 touchdown.
1 touchdown. Yeah.
So if he throws one more and they get 100 yards, whatever. But it just doesn't make sense to
No.
where, that's where they lost. But it's mind-boggling how it's just really confusing because a PJ Fleck team was held to that little bit of rushing yards.
I say now it's going to sound crazy that I even kind of asked this, but I just want to ask more kind of for giggles as far as what you think, because unless you're a Minnesota fan, a lot of people I don't think are really affected by this, and maybe he would be. Do you think that almost puts PJ Fleck in the topic of conversation for you're a good coach because obviously you've shown that you can coach them to win the big games that you maybe shouldn't win, but now you're losing games that you maybe necessarily shouldn't lose. Now, albeit it's still a conference game. These are teams that still face off, fairly regularly. That may probably change as now we've gotten rid of divisions and,
Right.
as the schedules mix up and whatnot. But this is still something that, again, it doesn't matter if you win by 1 or if you win by 100. You should have, been able to win this game overall. And like you said, for the fact that you only came out of this with 35 rushing yards with a PJ Fleck led team when you had, running back like Mo Ibrahim for Minnesota not that long ago, and this is the results that you're getting, it does make me kind of wonder, is it one of those that maybe PJ Fleck should potentially move on because he's done about all you can do for Minnesota and maybe he finds a better opportunity elsewhere?
So do you think is what you're asking is do you think he's done well enough in his tenure at Minnesota to be able to take a step up at this point?
I would think so.
I would think he would be. I honestly, when you have a bigger, if you like his coaching style, you can see his coaching style through the team that he puts on the field, and he's winning. He's winning with games that he shouldn't win. He's doing much better this year than he should have.
Yeah.
At least a lot of people, many did I see having Minnesota be even a 6-win team, or if it was 6-6. Now they very well may end up 6-6, but they have the opportunity to be better, and that so his style. I think he correlates to something as long as the program knows what they're taking in with his style. I think he could take over a step up and do very, very well.
I say because considering it's Minnesota, where you're at, the conference that you're in, they've even talked about it. We've even talked about how they don't exactly have the greatest NIL money as far as big money to spend on a lot of these big recruits coming out. He's 56-37 just at Minnesota, and he's been there since 2017. So in 7 years, you managed to go 56-37 in the Big Ten, and especially in the Big Ten West at the current for about 90% of your tenure. That's pretty dang good, if you ask me, in my personal opinion. And he's 6-2 in bowl games, and as a head coach overall, he's 86-59. So I mean, he knows how to win.
I'm just gonna throw this out there, and I have no reason to believe it. I just think it. Okay. I would not be shocked to see somebody like a Florida, who's going to be looking for a new coach, maybe even try to get him because he runs a tight ship.
Yeah.
And right now, that's kind of what Florida's missing,
Yes.
So they need some restructuring. When were their best years? Steve Spurrier prior to Urban Meyer, correct?
Yeah.
He ran a tight ship.
Yep.
And then they transitioned to Urban Meyer, and he ran whatever kind of ship you want to call it, and he left. And they've been trying to regain it since.
Yeah.
So you know what? Let the pendulum swing right back, and maybe get somebody like a PJ Fleck that runs a tight ship and has certain expectations. I wouldn't be shocked to see that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either, and especially his salary right now is only $6 million a year. You could very easily go to Florida and command.
That's it.
He could. I mean, I know for us, I mean, I wouldn't be upset by $6 million. You can pay me to be the ball boy for $6 million. I'll take that all day, every day. But for him, he could very easily go to Florida, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Florida boosters say, "Hey, here's like $10 million a year. Just go ahead and sign for that orange and blue for us."
And you know what? I would not damn him for doing it.
No.
If I got offered a position that offered me 40% more, or actually 66% increase of what I make now, I'm leaving.
Yep, I take that deal.
And it's the same job, really, just a little bit more pressure.
Right?
Okay,
just different place, warm weather, nice weather.
I know how to do that. That's
I can get big recruits because I have a big brand. Let's go. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I'll do it.
Let's speed through the Purdue goes to Columbus, lays an egg, gets beat 45-0. Ohio State, number 2 in the country. They have improved to 8-1, 5-1 in the conference. I've got an interesting thing to talk about. Well, I may hold on to that till next week. Oregon beats Maryland 39-18. No threat there.
No.
Not really much to talk about. The Ducks go to 10-0, 7-0 in the conference.
Yeah.
Washington and Penn State. I'm a little surprised by this, just for the fact that it was 28-0 at the half. Washington was never in this. I thought they might be able to hang around with them. They didn't even show up.
Yeah, and by the looks of it, Will Rogers, the typical starting quarterback for the Huskies, didn't even play a majority of the game. It looks like Demon Williams, the freshman for Washington, apparently took more snaps and had more statistics than Will Rogers did, because he was 6 of 10 for 60 yards, and really kind of the same thing.
I didn't even look.
That's what I'm trying to figure out right now, actually. Apparently he went 10 of 13, 59 yards and a pick, so he apparently got benched, and they just said, let's try out the freshman that we got.
He was just having a bad day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fair. I'm not damning anybody for doing that, but yeah, that one caught me off guard. I was listening to a little bit of it. I forget what I was. Oh, it was excuse me, on my way home from my doing PA for the university here. I was driving home, and the Penn State Washington game was on, so I listened to a little bit of that on the radio while I was driving home, and it was I was just like, wow, it's at the time it was 21-0. So I looked up a couple of other times. By halftime, it's 28-0, and I'm like, I'm not even going to pay attention to this game anymore. I can, turn my views to other games and stuff. So, because around that same time, Michigan went into Bloomington to play the Hoosiers. IU comes out with a big win, 20-15 over the Wolverines. What was your main takeaway from this one, Tony?
I think this was Indiana's first true test of playing somebody that truly means something, because the biggest knock against IU all season, and I mean,
nobody.
You ain't played nobody. You ain't played nobody that's worth nothing as far as your schedule. And I mean, realistically, if you look back at IU's schedule, they really haven't. I mean, Nebraska is probably the hottest team that came in there. They blew them out 56-7. Nebraska has since fallen off pretty badly. They beat Michigan State. Again, Michigan State has not exactly been a team that anybody's turned heads.
47 unanswered.
Correct. So, I mean, you look at the rest of it, it's like, okay, they beat up Maryland. Maryland's obviously having a bad year. They beat up Northwestern. That's not difficult. They beat up Washington, who obviously just laid a goose egg against Penn State.
But beat Michigan.
That's correct. And so for Michigan to come into Bloomington, into the Hoosiers' house, and really this was a game that we really saw Indiana struggle, because we saw Indiana not able to do a lot of things that they've been doing to opponents throughout the past few games. The passing game was there, but they weren't as prolific or dynamic as they were in a lot of the previous games. The running attack was not there. that Indiana has really relied on the last few games too, especially with Curtis Rourke now coming back, this being his second game back post injury. So there is a lot for this Hoosiers team to, I think, adapt to. And I think with Coach Signetti, you go into halftime, you're up 17-3. Michigan obviously made adjustments, which good on Sharon Moore. And I know for whatever reason, there's a lot of people calling for Sharon Moore's job right now. And it's like, you had a lot of people drafted and whatnot. So he's got a little bit he's got to work with here. Like give him a break in his first year, man. He's got to figure out this quarterback situation. But I mean, for Indiana to not actually be able to, beat Michigan by double digits maybe hurts them a little bit. But again, you're looking at they are still the, defending national champions from last year. They're still a team that does have quite a bit of talent, even though maybe not all of that talent was on the field at that time. This is still a big win for IU that says, hey, we can beat a team that is, that was built to win a national championship, that still has a good chunk of that talent still on that team. And we were able to come away with the win.
I'll tell you what, I think this built more character for IU is what it did. Last week, I think it was, I was listening to the college sports radio on Sirius XM, and the question was posed, who on your rival makes you hate to love what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And it was Curt Cignetti, because I hate that he's doing this at IU.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I am like driving the bus right now for IU football. I think this did so much for them in the fact that the week before against Michigan State, they were the first time they trailed. They trailed by 10 points. It wasn't just a field goal down. They were down by 2 full possessions, okay? They didn't blink an eye. They recovered, they recouped, they regrouped, and they trudged forward.
Yeah.
Then against Michigan, they jumped out. It was thought when they had to kick the field goal to make it 17-3. I was listening to the Michigan call at that time, and they were saying, they got to be careful. We're going to be down 21-3 at the half. So they were moving the ball. They were working well. Something happened. They get tested in the second half to a good adjustment. They still won. They still managed to find a way to win the game. And I think even winning ugly in a game that a lot of people probably didn't pick them because it's still IU.
Yeah.
You still have that doubt. And I just think that this going into a bye week for them is the hugest thing that could have happened. They got the win still, but they struggled. That means they've got a week to bust their butts, make that better, get healthier, and then go into game week against Ohio State.
And I will say too, this also gives credit to Coach Cignetti and really this whole entire IU team, because think about how this also could have gone. Because how many times have we seen in college football, if you're a team that's on a hot streak and you're on a roll like IU is, and then of course the big question, because everybody jumps ahead whenever they're looking at the schedule and they go, man, IU is ranked number 8 right now. They're going to have to face number 2 Ohio State here soon, and that those egos and that emotion kind of starts to get fed into people's heads and whatnot. And then they have a game like Michigan right in between there before the bye week. There's a lot of teams that maybe think, Michigan has fallen off. We're on a hot streak. We'll roll Michigan and then we'll roll into Ohio State. That'll be our big one, because too many people look ahead and they don't focus on the game in front of them. So, I mean, that says a lot about, Coach Cignetti and IU, that they were like, no, we need to focus one game at a time. We need to focus on Michigan. Like you said, it was close. And like you said with Michigan State too, how many times would we have seen either the old IU team and even a lot of college teams, you go down 10-0 in the first quarter after not having given up any points in the first quarter at all. and to be able to rally from that. There's a lot of teams that they would be like, okay, well, we got to force something. We got to do something right now to get back in it. And then that's when you start to get sloppy. You start to get mistakes. You get hurried. Then it just seems like there's that very cool, calm, collective presence that Coach Signetti has of saying, nope, we're going to take it one possession at a time. Points will come. We just
You
have
can
to
only
execute and
score
do what we need to
7
do.
points in one possession.
You can score 8.
Well, in a regular
Technically,
possession.
you can score
Yes,
8,
I
but
get
yes,
that, but
on
you know
normal
what I mean.
circumstances, yes.
So yeah, I have drunk the Kool-Aid and am now driving the bus for IU the rest of this football season, minus the bucket game where I hope they beat IU.
That's fair.
I'm just saying. I don't think that it's shaming my Purdue fandom if, as an analyst, I've just really been impressed by how they've done it. So that's why I'm really hoping they do make it to the playoff, and even if they get beat in the first round, hey, at least they had a significant enough of a season to be able to experience that 12-team playoff. So
and it's something to build on for the future, because I mean,
sure.
if you look at the history of Indiana football,
and it just strengthens my conviction that I think Kirk Signetti will leave IU in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, it's very possible. Very, very possible.
But yes, the history. I apologize. I've totally cut you off there.
No, you're good. You're good. But because, like you said, it's very possible that he leaves. But I mean, nonetheless, I mean, for the fact that they're 10 wins for the first time in program history ever, no matter how the rest of this season goes, it is an absolute beyond success for IU football, no matter what.
Yep, I agree. Let's go into the games this week. Tonight, UCLA goes to Washington. It's a 9 p.m. kickoff on Fox. Not much I really want to talk about that. I think they're both teams that are struggling, but one's trending up a little and the other's trending down. UCLA going up and Washington down a little bit, but I think it could be. What in the world do I know? They've got Washington a 4-point favorite.
I say Washington's favored, believe it or not. And according to ESPN's matchup predictor, Washington has about a 65% chance of winning.
They don't have a horrible team, and there's the formula is still seeing UCLA as a rebuilding team, not necessarily performing outside of what they're doing. So, whatever. I mean, there's not much there that I want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, Will Rogers, honestly, for considering what it is, considering it's Washington, kind of the same thing as Michigan. Here's what's funny. Michigan won the national title, lost a ton of their talent. They're 5-5. Washington basically lost their entire team to either the NFL or Alabama. They're also sitting at 5-5. But I mean, Will Rogers, he's thrown 290 balls. He has 207 completions, almost 2,400 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 5 picks. I mean, that's honestly not a terrible season for a transfer coming into a team that is under a new system, new build, everything.
Oh yeah. So. It's still just not entertaining. Plus,
I mean, don't get me wrong. This is not high on my radar to watch by no stretch of the imagination, and the ticket prices show that too, because tickets are as low as $8.
Yep. Let's go to Saturday's matchup, a noon Eastern kickoff. Number 2 Ohio State travels to Northwestern, playing at Wrigley Field on the Big Ten Network. Ohio State, the 28.5-point favorite. What do you think on that one there, Tony?
Yeah, I don't exactly expect a 2016 Cubs miracle win for the Northwestern Wildcats. We'll put it that way.
No hope. Yes, go ahead and do that. No, Northwestern's a confusing team because they've outperformed at times that you just assume that they were going to struggle, and then games you're like, okay, they should win this. They've struggled, maybe even lost. So I think you're right. I think Ohio State's the second. I think they're appropriately ranked right now at number 2. I do think they're the second best team behind Oregon, and I just think right now, short of a loss to IU, they're going to the Big Ten championship game to play Oregon. I mean, that's the truth there. So I don't see much of anything. I think 28.5 probably right around where I would keep it. So I don't know. Take Northwestern in the points. It's going to be
Yeah.
24 points, or something.
You're right.
Whatever. I don't care. I don't bet. I don't know what I'm talking about, so don't take that as, well, this guy told me.
Right. Well,
I have no
we'll put it this way.
premise behind it.
If you think Ohio State is going to win by more than 4 touchdowns, definitely take the over. And in my personal opinion, I would take the over. I mean, they beat, no offense, they beat your Boilermakers 45-0. They'll probably beat Northwestern at minimum by 35-0. So I would take the over.
Raleigh. Michigan State travels Champaign, take on the Illini 2:30 on Fox Sports or FS1. Sorry, that's at Memorial Stadium in Champaign. Illinois, a 2.5-point favorite at home, so that means that the casinos think Michigan State's it's pretty much a push.
Yeah, and according to ESPN, Illinois has a 69% chance of winning, according to this. Well, no, sorry, not 69, 67. I got excited. I saw the 0.8. I know, I got excited. I'm going to go with Illinois, to be honest with you. I didn't really want to. I mean, overall, roster-wise, Illinois has done really well. I think for Michigan State, this is still a matter of rebuilding. Childs has struggled a little bit this year. He has 8 touchdowns to 11 picks, whereas Altmaier has 16 touchdowns to 3 picks. And I feel like the Illinois defense is still pretty solid. I think Michigan State still has a bright future as far as what they're building there in East Lansing for the long term. But right now, going into the game on tomorrow, I'm going to take the Illini on that one.
Aiden Childs is 19 years old.
Yes, also true.
Moving on.
Also true.
My point on that is, no, he shows streaks of what he's gonna be when he matures and gets older. So I honestly, by this point in the season, you should be kind of advancing a little bit. So maybe he cleans it up a little bit in the last 2 to 3 weeks, and Michigan State turns around and wins a couple of games. They still have a route to 6 wins. I just think they've got to win 2 of their last 3, I think, to get there. I think.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't be shocked to see them win this week. I really wouldn't be. They played a good Boston College pretty well. They should have won it, but they were both playing in some crappy weather, and it just happened that they didn't pull that out in the end. They played Michigan well.
They say they kept it close against Michigan.
Said that a lot of people on campus felt that Michigan State was the best team on the field that day. They just fell victim to some unfortunate events.
Here's the thing I will say, though, because I didn't get a chance to be on that show with you guys, and I was like, this is maybe the one show that I want to be on. Was the aggravated the snot out of me the most was Michigan was up by 2 touchdowns at the time, and Michigan State was like, we are absolutely running the ball. And I'm like, if you're down by like a touchdown or maybe like 10 points, okay, run the football, let your defense get rested. You're down by 2 scores. There's like 5 minutes left. I need you to kick it in gear here a little bit.
Put a little fire under you.
But I do agree overall, though. I mean, they jumped out to that 7-0 lead on Michigan, and it just seemed like, okay, it looks like Michigan State is going to try to take that early momentum and just run with it. And, like you said, for the fact that was at the time where Michigan wasn't exactly still super high up there. They had just got knocked out of the ranks, so they were still fairly respected as far as how people looked at them. I think Michigan State still gave them a good run for their money. And I mean, their remaining schedule, they take on Illinois, they take on your Boilermakers next week, and then they take on Rutgers. So, I mean, they could
win all 3.
Very much so.
They could win all 3. But I guess my biggest thing is I think we're going to see Michigan State get better. They're going to be trending up, at least in a positive motion, going towards the end of the season. Maybe this is the start of that, to where they start a winning streak into it. So, Penn State travels to West Lafayette at 3:30 on CBS to take on the 1-7 or 1-8 Boilermakers, and the 28.5-point favorite. Penn State on the road. Over under 50 points. I don't think it's enough. Let's move on.
I say, are you going to that? Tickets are only $5. I can spot you $5.
I've got a university game here. I do PA. I got that.
That's fair. I say I'll spot you $5 if you want to go to that. I mean, I know it's steep ticket prices, but I'll cover that payment for
You'd
you,
have
buddy.
to drive up to Fort Wayne so we could cross, and you could just hand the $5 bill out the.
There we go.
Nebraska, excuse me. Nebraska travels to L.A. to take on the Trojans, Southern Cal, at 4 p.m. on Fox. USC's a 7.5-point favorite. I don't know. I haven't seen enough to be convinced that they're 8 points better almost than Nebraska. This was the one that has the most meaning that you and I were talking about, that there's not really a drive to watch it because I don't know that I want to watch that. Yeah. But one of those teams is either going to get bowl eligible or end a winning streak. That's what's going to happen with the winner of that. And it means the most, I think, to both teams that are participating. So that's all I can get out of that game. That's all I can get.
Honestly, I would say Nebraska gets the upset. And the reason why I say that,
I wouldn't be shocked to that,
is because USC is benching their starting quarterback, Miller Moss, for Jaden. Oh, I hope I enunciate this correctly. See, this is why we need Dalton here. Dalton knows how to say all these weird names. Mava? That Jaden. Jaden for the Trojans is
just
getting put in.
Number 10.
Number 10 for the USC Trojans is coming into. Oh man, don't do that. Here I am. I'm just believing you. He's number 14.
Number 14.
He's coming in to replace Miller Moss, who has had a very hot and cold season for the Trojans as well. And I mean, realistically, again, you can kind of look at his stats. 2,500 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 9 picks. I mean, he's having to fill in for Caleb Williams. It's a USC team that pretty much the same as all the big college football teams have had, as far as he's coming in to replace a all-pro quarterback that they had beforehand. The team gets decimated by both transfers, people going to the NFL, graduating, etc. And for a USC team that's been really hot and cold, you have to come into the Big Ten, which, let's be realistic, it's been a big adjustment for USC coming into the Big Ten because they have not done well. They're 2-5. Most of those wins have all come when they're in Los Angeles. Now, Nebraska has kind of had its typical Nebraska woes, but Dylan Raiola, I think he is a extremely bright future in Nebraska. Like, if they can get a couple more pieces to potentially click there in Lincoln, this is going to be a very scary Nebraska team, in my opinion. Now, I know ESPN has USC winning. They have like an 82% chance of winning in this. I think just because of the continuity, because Nebraska's coming in here, I feel they're going to be a little bit more hungry. And I don't know what to expect out of USC's new quarterback. I'm going to go with the Cornhuskers in an upset personally, especially against
Nebraska gets bowl eligible for the first time since 2015.
Yeah, almost 10 years against a sophomore quarterback. I think it's very possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. I'm going to pay attention to what happens, but I'm not going to sit down and watch it. I'm just not.
That's fair.
I can't get up for that one. I'd be done with my PA by then, and I'll find something.
I say I'll have it on in the background. I don't know how closely I'll be watching it, but I'll have it in sight.
I've got my big screen. I can split it into 4 to where I've got 4 football games. It might be one that's on, but I'm not watching it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be there. It's like, oh, look.
Every other one's at a commercial. Okay. Okay. And that's it. But Rutgers travels to Maryland, 6:00 Eastern, a 6 p.m. Eastern kick. Take on the Terrapins in College Park. Both a couple. Again, Maryland just got thumped by Oregon. They're not horrible, but I've heard that there's some clamoring for the firing of the coach's name.
I can tell you here in a second.
Good Lord. I want to say Micah Shrewsbury, and I know that's not right. I don't know why I thought that or was even thinking that. Anyways, They've been
I
calling
say,
for him.
you
They're
keep going.
4 and
I'll find
5
it.
right now. They're 4 and 5, 17th in the Big Ten, so they're right above Purdue right
Yeah,
now.
Mike Losley, by the way.
I'm sorry,
Mike Losley or
okay.
Loxley. Sorry, Mike Loxley.
Mike Loxley. They've been calling for his firing, or some have. Let's say it that way. There's been rumblings.
Yeah.
I don't think that's. He lost Tua's brother, Talia.
Yeah, Talia Tungavailoa.
Tungavailoa. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, I could get that one.
I still struggle with it. That's why I have to hear somebody say it and then I can repeat it.
There we go.
But they had to replace a lot. So
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe getting rid of him. Who you gonna get?
I say here's kind of the other thing. He's 33 and 38 with Maryland, which I mean, okay, he's 5 games under 500. As a head coach, he hasn't done well like historically at all. He's 35 and 64 as a head coach. But I mean, again, it's kind of the same way at PJ Fleck in Minnesota. You're in the Big Ten East, so you had to face Ohio State every year. You had to face Michigan every year. You had to face Penn State every year. Like
that's
those
3
are
losses almost guaranteed every year.
Exactly. So the best you can hope for is 9-3, and that's with the hope that Michigan State doesn't have a really good year. That's with the hope that
by IU,
not getting upset by IU. You have to hope that Rutgers isn't playing great. Like you have to hope for a lot to not happen, and then you're still facing teams in the Big Ten West. Oh, hey, we have to face Iowa. Great, they have a top 10
Purdue,
defense most of the time.
Right.
So I mean it's one of those that I feel like he's kind of in the same boat of, I'm not saying he should get maybe a premier top tier job, but there are some of these jobs and some of these conferences, you are absolutely going to be limited by, financial resources, by brand resources. It's like, yeah, I can only do so much with Maryland football to make it good and get it to that point, especially when you look at all of my opponents I have to face. Like you said, you at minimum had 3 losses every single year. Now, you kept it close. Don't get it twisted. You kept it close, at least against Ohio State and Penn State. You took them right to the very end.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still hard to compete with that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And they're not a normally high rung Big Ten team anyways.
No.
It's not often that they have a few years in a row that are good. That's just what Maryland has been since they've joined the Big Ten, and that's not knocking them. That's just the facts, man.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. This one's a Maryland needs it to regroup. Rutgers needs it. I think they'll be bowl eligible if they do. Yeah, they'll be bowl eligible with a win. So that's and I wouldn't have thought that a win against Maryland would have made them bowl eligible, because I would have thought for sure they lost to Minnesota. So that's even more, Rutgers is on the upswing because of the outcome last week and all that fun stuff with them. So finally, the game of the week, I guess. It's on NBC. It's not on Peacock, believe it or not.
I know. Crazy.
I don't know. But on NBC, number 1 Oregon travels to Camp Randall Stadium, Madison, to take on the Badgers. Oregon's a 14-point favorite, a 51.5 over under. I think this might be probably your game of the week.
Yeah, I mean and I know I said this because we talked about it off air. When you think about Wisconsin, what is one place that people always say is the absolute hardest to play in on the road, especially in the Big Ten? It's Wisconsin. It's Camp Randall. And I know this is not the Wisconsin of historic years where it's like, man, they were kind of that dark horse team in the Big Ten that was usually kind of sitting there. They'd be 8-2. They'd be like, 9-3 type of thing, where it's like, man, this is really close as far as they could contend with anybody in the Big Ten goes. So I feel like it might be a little bit of a contest for Oregon coming into Wisconsin. Now, I know Oregon deals with a little bit of more cold weather than some of their LA counterparts, so Wisconsin won't have that environmental factor to their aid. But I do still think it'll be a fairly decent game. I really do like what Luke Fickell has been able to do with Wisconsin the last couple of years. Again, it seems painful, and I know for Badgers fans it probably is painful to watch. But this is still a team you do see the upward growth of the Badgers, and I still think the future is pretty bright in Wisconsin.
Well, this is going to be the most interesting. I think Oregon wins by 3 scores, and it's going to be, just like that. But it's always nice. Wisconsin's, you're right. It's going to be difficult, and maybe they surprise me. I'm not convinced that there's anybody other short of Ohio State that is going to really push them until
push them
they
to that
get
limit.
into the playoffs. I
Yeah.
just don't see it happening. That's no offense to any other Big Ten team, but I can't bring myself to think it, and I just don't know that Wisconsin's got enough horses. I mean, they gave up 31 unanswered to USC in the
Yes, they did after they were
after
leading.
after they were ahead. So I'm not going to say that's not a thing that could happen. And Oregon's a lot better than USC. So
Correct.
So moving on, let's go ahead and we're gonna pull up the most recent Fox College Football CFP Top 25 and take a gander at it. I have it zoomed into the top 15 though, Tony, because really after number 5, it doesn't matter for us.
Yep, that's true. Yeah.
This college football top 5: Oregon number 1, Ohio State number 2, Penn State number 4, IU number 5. That's all of the Big Ten representation in the top 25, and they are 4 of the. This is historic in a sort of poll. The Big Ten possesses 4 of the top 5 teams in the poll.
Yeah. No, you say, yeah. I'm still kind of in shock, and it's also one of those I'm trying to look back on, and I'm like, well, I also trying to think of, just imagine if it was still the 4-team playoff format, and 3 of the 4 teams that would be going in are Big Ten. So you have a 75
with a Big Ten kicker.
I say, yeah, you have a 75% chance that your national champion would come out of that. A Big Ten team. It's cool. I do still have a lot of questions about this college football playoff committee and some of the picks that they make for some of these. And it's because to me, and you tell me what you think about this, because this isn't even a matter of conference bias. Do you not think it's kind of weird that they have teams like Ohio State and Penn State at 2 and 4, because when you look at who they've played and who they've lost to, obviously, Penn State lost to Ohio State lost to Oregon. It's like they factor in, they lost to the best team in the country, and for Ohio State they only lost it by 1. Penn State lost to Ohio State by 7 or 8, one of the two. I can't math very well. 7. It's almost like they kind of factor in they have a really good quality loss. And I feel like, to me, that's really weird to try to make the argument of, you lost the best.
Well, you look at IU. Let's take IU. They're undefeated, number 5 behind 3 teams that have a loss. Right. And I think the way they've been looked at is, you mentioned it earlier, that Michigan was their first real test. So it's one of those that since they have one, they're undefeated. They're undefeated. They're very good. Very good. Almost the best. Not quite.
Right.
But we can't put them ahead of. I mean, Penn State lost by 1 possession to Ohio State, who lost by 1 point to Oregon. So those losses are better than any of the quality wins IU has.
Here's where I'm going to make 2 defenses to 2 teams that you may or may not kind of expect. I would make more of a defense to BYU, because BYU is also undefeated, and they've actually beaten a couple of really good teams overall. The other one, because to me, if they're going to go off of they lost to a quality team, Boise State needs to be up in single digits because their only loss was a field goal to the number 1 team in the country, and they have won every other
Now,
game
the
they played.
one thing that you'll have to take into consideration, though, is they'd probably still be the 12 seed because they're the group of 4.
Yeah, yeah. But by the way that the playoff rules are worded, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I might be, it's the top 4 highest ranked champions get the bye, and then whoever the 5th is. So it doesn't say that technically the group of 5 is automatically that last one. We're probably correct in assuming that the Power 4 is going to get those first 4 conference buys, and more than likely they will because every conference has had a pretty good team that is ahead of it and leading right now. But that does leave the door open that say BYU loses a couple, they're still the representative for the Big 12 right now. But Boise State could maybe slink in there at the 4 seed.
Yeah, maybe
Possible.
Well, I'm not too worried about necessarily the rankings that we just looked at. It's this one that I think is a little more interesting to look at because you've got Boise State still in there. The top 10 means absolutely nothing because if you look, or the top 12 means nothing because if you look, there is no Georgia.
Yep, first team out.
There's no Georgia. So, and they're ranked number 12 in that top 25. So really it doesn't matter because look, Miami is 4 and they're number 9 in the country. So they're in that group or the Power 4. So they get the 4 buys, because they are that champion.
Well, and heck, look at BYU. They're ranked number 6. They're sitting there at number 3. Look at Ohio State, the number 2 team in the country, is number 5 and has to go on the road.
No,
to face
they're home.
Miami.
They're home.
Oh, well, if
Boise State.
Well, I'd be more than sure they would probably beat Boise State. Let's just be realistic.
Maybe, but but once you get into the second round, it's neutral sites.
True, but I mean, and luckily the brackets don't change. So if Ohio State was to win, it's not like then okay, well they would. We have
could
to face
have
like
a
Texas.
third Ohio State Oregon game in the Final Four.
That's very true. That's very true. Hey, we were hoping for that last year with Michigan versus Ohio State. It's like, man, you could have it for the Big Ten championship, and then you could either have it for a semifinal game, and then you could have it, or you could have it for a national championship. Yeah, you think of it 3 times. Like, all right, best of 3, who wins?
Can you imagine how loud Bloomington would be if Alabama had to come in town?
I'm going to say though that. For Indiana, that wouldn't be fair. We know what would happen, unfortunately.
Maybe.
Well, don't get me wrong. Even being colorblind, I'm rooting for the crimson and white, but it's not Alabama.
Cream and crimson,
whatever. Again, colorblind. White is white.
But Ole Miss, Penn State, that would be a good game. Ole Miss gets into this 12-team projection. After beating Georgia quite convincingly. And people are damning Georgia for losing that game. Look, they lost to Alabama when Alabama was playing very well. They then lost to a very good Ole Miss team. They have 2 pretty decent losses. I think they'll probably work their way back into this, maybe. But it's really awkward to see no Georgia in this tree.
Well, it also doesn't help when your quarterback looks like Sid the Sloth whenever he plays. He's also thrown a unhealthy amount of interceptions this year too, because I mean you're looking at a guy that started out as he was a potential top 5 quarterback draft pick in the NFL, and now we're looking at him, he's thrown 17 touchdowns, he's thrown 12 interceptions just in the last 4 games. So from October 12th to now past November 12th, he has thrown 9 interceptions to 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games.
Well then.
They do this every year. Does
Yep.
nobody care about Sid the Sloth?
Okay, well,
Does
that
nobody care about the Georgia Bulldogs?
wow. Okay. Hey, you know what? I think that's maybe the second one that they've put out to this point
Yeah.
since the rankings have come out. So it's
Yeah.
going to be markedly different in 3 weeks. Trust me. I mean,
Oh,
I'd be
yeah.
shocked if there aren't 4 new teams in that different from this one for that final one where it shakes itself out and the world becomes normal at that point.
Yeah. They so believe it or not, they even found supposedly a path that there could even be a 3-loss conference champion, and they would potentially I don't know how it would make sense because of the playoff rules, but there could potentially be a 3-loss conference champion that would be out of the playoffs, or they would be like the 13th, they would be the 12th seed of the playoffs. And that would be, there is a convoluted path for LSU to go 9-3, be the SEC champions, and be number 12. And I'm like, as a Tigers fan, we absolutely know that's not happening. But there's some
and you
convoluted way of
absolutely
getting it
don't
there.
want it to happen either.
No, I'm like, please don't do this.
Don't make us go to Columbus to play.
No, please
the
don't do
first week.
this. Like,
I
if
still
we're gonna,
think. Oh, go ahead.
I say if LSU has to go to Columbus, please do it when LSU is like halfway decent. Please don't do it like they limp in there and it's like, please don't do this.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was getting ready to say a little bit ago. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you just don't want to get sent to the slaughter like that
No.
potentially. So that okay. Well, that wraps up this newest episode of Big Talk. Tony, if you would, why don't you let everybody know all our intimate details?
I know I got all the rust off from a couple weeks ago, so I'm ready for this one. I'm ready. If you enjoyed the show, please check us out on Facebook at B1G Talk. That is Big Talk. Instead of AI, you're going to put a 1 in there. Not all Big Talk. Not same, different. Not same. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and X, formerly known as Twitter, at B1G_talk. Same thing. Big Talk, except the I is a 1, and you can put a little underscore in there. You can catch us every week on the All Sports All Plays network here on Friday mornings, which you can also find on your phone's app store, whether that be Android or Apple. And Sam is nice enough, he uploads this later in the day on the Lounge Media Group and on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. Well, as I just said, that wraps it up for the newest episode of Big Talk. For Tony Hollinsworth, Inside the Hoosier Mind, when is it every week?
It is every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern or 3 p.m. Pacific time.
All right. Well, that's Tony Hollinsworth. Thank you again, Tony, for filling in for being a temporary and hope maybe permanent replacement to the best dude we've had the honor to work with.
To the GOAT.
That's right. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. And from Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar, blue blood, we'll see you later.